one?
Schoolhouse?
Yeah, the schoolhouse.
Yeah, well,
I don't know who
she had
owns
actually
it.
mentioned
I
that.
think it's a town, I'm not sure.
That she'd like to have Danny looked in since she hasn't
It was on town
finished paying
property.
for it
Okay,
the first time.
Right, yeah,
It'd be
yeah.
nice that.
Maybe get a discount.
It'd just be nice that it's actually at least back to what it was
Yeah.
by the same person.
It's easy for kids.
I'll
to get
pass it on.
Yeah, I weren't sure. They just made it, they sent a letter saying they're gonna do a temporary repair until next year, and they just really didn't describe what the temporary
When did the
repair
letters
was.
come out?
I don't know.
We got it Saturday.
I
Okay.
had a couple of mine go missing when I was.
Dan said he heard that they were gonna put
I think
just some
they go down
reclaiming.
and they take them. They
I
don't.
don't know how you can reclaim in a driveway on a slope. Would you please rise for the pledge, please? Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
June 19th, 2012.
Roll call, please.
Counselor Bowie?
Here.
Counselor Bickford?
Yeah.
Counselor Ward?
Here.
Counselor Pomelo?
Here.
Counselor La Rochelle?
Here.
Counselor Lunt?
Here.
And Counselor Mason?
Mason is not going to be tonight. She's
excused.
excused.
Thank you very much. Next item is the public hearing. There is none, and under audience participation, at this time, those in the audience who wish to address the council may come forward. Please use the microphone at the podium. State your name and address for the record.
All set?
Good evening. I'm Carol Shimko. I live at 20 Webster Road in Lisbon. It's nice to see you folks. I do want to apologize to Councilman Bowie and Councilman Bickford. I sent an email this weekend on Sunday to the councilors at large and the councilors that represent my district in regards to fireworks. I don't know if you have in your packet a copy of that. I think Town Manager Eldridge was
Yep, I didn't.
going to do something. Did you receive?
No, I received it, but they have not seen
They
the
have
copies of
not.
it.
I have a
Okay.
copy of it that I can share with
have-
you.
Yeah.
I brought two copies. I brought extra copies.
They were both brought up to speed on the content of the letter. Yeah.
Okay, I just, out of courtesy. Since you have what's there and my concerns, I do want to add to that email that Sunday night fireworks did actually stop at 10 o'clock, thank goodness. And then Monday night, we had a good night's sleep. However, this afternoon, they already started up at 1:15 in our neighborhood, and they're just, of course, they're just noise. So what I'd like to do is, as you consider my husband's and my email on fireworks, I just want to point out a few things, which I'm sure you probably have covered through the past several months in discussion about fireworks and how this is going to impact the town. But I'd like to point out the town ordinance, Article 4 on noise, in Section 26-91, which is the purpose of having the noise ordinance. I can read it if you'd like, or I don't know how much time I have. Also, Section 2699 of that same article, definitions on noise disturbance. And I would like for you to indulge me on that one, if you don't mind. It's not very long. And that reads, the definition of noise disturbance shall mean any sound which annoys or disturbs human or is unwanted, or which causes or tends to cause an adverse psychological effect on human beings, and any sound that endangers or injures the health of humans or disturbs a reasonable person of normal sensitivities. Which I think I fall into that category. But I do want you to consider those that may not have normal sensitivities, such as those that suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, which we have many of those people who have served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and also those that suffer from Asperger's and autism, which has increased dramatically in diagnosis, especially in children, and they're very sensitive to noise. And I happen to have a nephew who suffers from PTSD, who's wasn't pushing paper as a Marine, did 2 tours in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan. And my neighbor also has a grandson that suffers from Asperger's. I'd also like to point out Title 8 of the Maine Revised Statutes Annotated, Chapter 9A, Section 223-A, Section 8. And that does give a definitive time. This is state regulation now. This is not, because we don't have an ordinance in this town. Am I correct?
Correct.
All right. And it does give a definitive time as to when the fireworks are supposed to stop. So I guess for me, I'm looking at if an officer went on Friday night with the idea that we have a noise ordinance beginning at 9 o'clock, and the individual says to the officer that, "I'm sorry, I didn't realize." And the officer leaves. The officer calls me and tells me that the person apologizes. But then 30 minutes later, the same person is setting them off again. And then the last one went off at 11:30 at night. So that leads me to, how are we going to enforce if we allow fireworks? No matter what, we're going to have difficulty enforcing. But if we have a blanket coverage of saying they're banned from use, other than the typical, which you would go through for like Moxie Day Parade and July 4th, it will be a lot easier on the officers having to have to go and look at those situations. Right now, it seems like we've wasted a lot of time this past weekend, for sure. I know that only because I've gotten some feedback. There were a lot of calls. And they have to check every single one of them out, and they don't know what they're going to. So that means we need to increase staff. Now, we're talking about a town who's already looking to reduce streetlights to save money, which I have no objections to, all right? But then we're looking at allowing something to continue to go on that's going to actually increase our staffing needs. This is just my perspective. I'm open to having discussion as the appropriate time comes with other alternatives, but what my husband and I would prefer is to ban the use of the fireworks. Thank you very much for listening to me and considering this.
Thank you.
How did you know I had something to say? Larry Fillmore from Lisbon. I guess we're going to have to take this out of order. On February 21st, 2012, the council tabled the second reading of Chapter 24, Article 1 Fireworks Ordinance by sending the ordinance to the Community Policing Advisory Group for review. Are we going to have to wait 3 years to get a fireworks ordinance like we had to wait with a wellhead protection? I understand none of the ordinances are being enforced, but still there is the follow-up on this ordinance. Who is in charge of ensuring timely follow-up on these ordinances? That's point one. That goes along with yours. We're waiting since February. Okay? During the period of 1 November 2011 through May 14, 2012, was the undesignated fund ever below 12.5% of the town's general fund? This is a simple question which requires either a yes or a no. But this is the second time I've had to ask this question. According to the mission statement, the town is committed to sharing information with our citizens, including them as partners in the discussion-making process. Why have I had to sue the town twice and ask the state to step in to obtain information according to the judge and the state I was entitled to all along? Why is there no agenda items for all of the items being discussed at this meeting? If the citizens are restricted to addressing agenda items during the audience participation, it is vital the people are provided the documentation prior to the meeting. How else can the residents be partners in the decision-making process without the information necessary to discuss? There are no documents for the revolving loan fund application, the school chapter reserve request, Davis Cemetery Upper Dam, and the town manager's report. We can't talk about these things if we don't have them. We talked about this before a million times. The council has provided the documentation on several things, but they always leave out the things that I don't know why. Okay? And the final note, today at the library was the bug show. I took 2 of my grandkids there and they loved it. The library staff did an outstanding job with this, sponsoring this show. And they were very, very good. Thank you.
Good evening. Before I start, I got a couple things I've got to discuss. One of them I'd like to know, are we going to be able to get on a discussion on the upper dam as people in the audience?
I think tonight we're basically just getting information. I mean, I don't think there's going to be much of a discussion
Is that ever
tonight.
going to be discussed with the public?
I think this is going to be a long process. We're going to have plenty of time to discuss. Nothing's going to happen right off. So.
That's stirring quite a controversy in
Yeah.
town. On Grandview, where Grandview comes out on Webster Street in Lisbon, if you're coming down Grandview to turn on to Webster Street, the grass is about that high, and there's 2 big political signs right there, and when you come out and look back to see if there's any automobiles coming, it's just like having a sheet of plywood there. You can't see at all. That is an accident waiting to happen.
Webster Street North.
Grandview and Webster.
That's like my mom, she's short in a little car, and when she comes out, it's just like, driving inside of a Sonobu or something. That's one issue. Another issue I have is this. On 196, the ordinance, wellhead protection ordinance, clearly states there'd be no gravel pit or no mining at all on that area. The original ordinance says there'd be no mining or gravel extracted from that area, and it's going on. We have businesses scattered all up and down Route 9. Nothing's being done. The question that I arise is this. If we're going to allow people to not go by the ordinances in our town, how are we going to hold anybody accountable? If I wanted to build a garage or whatever, and I just build it, and I put a business in, I have a document at home stating that I could not run a business on Route 9. They're all over the place. How are you going to stop me? That would be discrimination at its best. And it's like that all over town. We're not enforcing any ordinances. Why are we worried about a fireworks ordinance, or any of them, when it would be discrimination to go after anybody on any ordinances if we're not upholding all of them? That would be discriminative.
I think it's tough, though. There's
Well,
a lot of factors involved, and one of the things that it gets concerning is it's not a black and white situation. There's the people, very much like yourself, have come to council and said, why don't you just allow these people to run businesses? We're doing an injustice by putting businesses out of business. We need to work with everybody. Then it's hard to come back the next day and say you need to put them all out of business. So to try to take care of the wishes of the town, to try to do it within a fair manner, it takes time. And unfortunately, it's something that you can't, it's kind of hard to take care of people's wishes on both sides in one ruling. It
But
really
how
is.
is it fair, may I ask, for a person to come to the town and ask for a variance to build a deck or to build a garage when we're not upholding any ordinances anyway?
But I don't think you'll find anybody on the council that feels that things are being, that things need to continue the way they are. I think we're in the process of trying to get that fixed.
Well, I think this is something that needs to be accelerated very quickly,
But I
because
don't-
I think we're going to get in a situation we don't want to be in.
But to actually state that the council really has no feelings and just allows it to happen and just doesn't care, I think is a misstatement. I think I think we are trying to do what we can.
And I agree with you that the council probably does care, but it's not what's being portrayed by the people on the outside when they see these things going on, and they're being told that they can't build a garage because they're too close to a line or their addition that they'd like to have.
As a counselor and a person on the planning board, you know that's not an easy answer, because you're...
No, but it's an issue that is very dear to me that I want to see resolved, and it's not being worked as quickly as it probably should be.
Thank you, Roger. Anybody else for audience participation?
Don Fellows from Fairview Drive in Lisbon. Just wanted to comment on the comment about the Route 9 situation and a lot of other business situations and residential situations in town. We did have I think on April 26th, a hearing about Route 9, and I apologize now, I wasn't here. That hearing should have been more open-ended to what do you want to see happen on Route 9 than it actually was portrayed. I know I hear it created a lot of angst on the part of people, and there were a lot of comments made where it was intended to be constructive, to come up with different ideas. That's not the way it ended up. That's why nothing has been, no action has been taken on that hearing as of this point. As a planning board, we've had workshops, and we've pretty much informally decided that our new planning process that we're going to use going forward this year, which begins very shortly, will include the Route 9 problem. And the hope is to include the town, those people that want to be included, on a positive change for the whole town over a long period of time. And Route 9 is part of that process. So it's not like it hasn't been thought of. I grant you, it has not been published. But that's soon to come. Thanks.
Good evening, Debbie Berry, 21 Huey Street, Lisbon Falls, Maine. On the agenda tonight, on item number 11 under executive session, the economic development briefing is behind closed doors. Why isn't that open to the public? Thank you.
That has to do with a loan that the council will come out of executive session. All that information is confidential. It is not public information. And once they come out of executive session, they will make a decision whether they will approve the loan or not. And they'll give you the name and the name of the business.
If it's approved. Any other takers for audience participation? Seeing none, we'll move on, Twyla.
Audience participation response? Are there any?
I was not here last week, and I was told that it was all taken, there was no response, so we're all good. Next item?
Is consent agenda. Any counselor wishing to have an item removed may do so now. Items removed from the consent agenda will be considered next. Seeing none. Order 2012-77 to approve the minutes of June 5th.
So moved.
Second that?
All those in favor?
Order passed, 6-0. Next item is council orders, resolutions, and ordinances. Order to...
If possible, could we actually have, would it be possible to have, consider the option of actually moving the executive session up? Would anybody want to make that motion that we would
I
take
would
that out
make
of
a
order?
motion so that we can get through our orders and resolutions to go into executive session for MRSA 405-6C Economic Development.
I'll second that.
All those in favor on council?
Order passed,
Go in
6-0.
chamber.
Yep, we'll just go in here.
It shouldn't be very long.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. Council all set?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, go ahead, we'll continue on with the meeting as we finished.
So would you like to go back to the council orders, resolutions, and ordinances? Order 2012-78?
Yes.
Okay. To adopt the proposed GA ordinance amendment, Attachment 1, incorporating the fiscal year 2013 temporary housing assistant limit, and Attachment 2, which is Appendix A, incorporating GA overall maximums, both to be effective on and after July 1, 2012.
This is something that you have an ordinance in place already. When the state sends you down changes in any of the areas for funding limits, you have to adopt them. Doesn't have to go through the whole first reading, second reading, because you have the ordinance in place. You're just amending something that's state mandated. You haven't done anything, from my understanding, since 2007, so this is part of the DHHS trying to get that under control. So it's a reduction in housing,
It's basically just putting us in line with what the state wants,
Yeah, yep.
what they're going to pay.
what they're going to pay, when they pay it.
Make a motion to accept?
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
This would be by ordinance, it'll be
okay.
probably a roll call vote.
Okay.
It's all right.
That's right.
Thank you, Twyla.
Counselor Bowie?
Yay?
Counselor Bickford?
Yay.
Counselor Ward?
Yay.
Counselor Pomelo?
Yes.
Counselor La Rochelle?
Yes.
Counselor Mason is absent. Counselor Lund?
Yes.
Order passed, 6-0.
Next item?
Order 2012-79, Moxie Festival road closures.
This is a list of roads that you do every year, just prior to the Moxie Festival. There's nothing unusual about it, it's the same list you do every year, so look forward to it.
I'll second.
All those in favor of the road closure?
Order passed, 6-0.
Now, I do have one question on that. We'll make sure we notify all the businesses and everything at a
Right.
time so that they're prepared for that actual
Closure.
dates and times.
Next item?
Order 2012-80, the revolving loan fund application.
I would make a motion that we authorize a revolving loan fund for Harvey Metals Incorporated at the amount of $100,000 for a term of 5 years at 5%.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Order passed, 6-0. Order 2012-81, school capital reserve request.
Actually, we do not, this was already voted on at the budget, so this doesn't have to be brought forward to us.
All right. Next item is Order 2012-82, Fisher Road bids.
Ryan will address the bids that we received for construction.
Good evening. On May 23rd, we advertised for replacement of the Douglas Bridge on the Fisher Road, as well as grinding and paving the road itself. We had quite a bit of interest, which we had a mandatory pre-bid meeting, and there was a big crowd. We received 7 bids. The low bid was Harry C. Crooker and Sons in the amount of $278,070.10. The next lowest bidder was St. Laurent and Sons at $356,991. There was 3 bidders that were real close to each other. The highest bid we received was actually $587,412. We have approximately $374,000 available for this project, and we recommend awarding to Harry C. Crooker and Sons. They need to get the bridge structure on order so we can get the work done during the work window we have approved through DEP.
Any questions from council?
Why such a difference?
I don't know what to tell you.
They all estimated that basically.
They all had to go to the mandatory pre-bid. They all got the same information. From what I understand, in the comments that were made at the bid opening, was that Crooker owns all the equipment they need to do the project. There's no subcontractors. And again, from what I've heard, they did, when I understand, lay off a bunch of people recently, so they're really hungry for work. So I'm excited based on the prices.
The bridge structure is, what's the bridge structure
It's
going
a
to be made out of now?
Concrete box culvert, open bottom, So it's a 3 or 4 section concrete precast structure that'll be moved in, set in with a crane. In order to avoid Army Corps of Engineer permits, we ended up designing the bridge so it would span the existing bridge abutments. So that way we're putting our footers and stuff behind those. So that way we're not doing any in-stream work. And as long as you weren't narrowing up the stream, we didn't have to get a permit from Army
So we're
Corps.
not widening anything?
No. The bridge will be wider than it is right now.
Okay.
But the vertical length in the road, the traveled width, won't be any different in the stream, but the width, the lane width will be
The
different.
lane width will be wider?
Correct.
You fit 2 trucks now.
With an
High rates
approved
of speed.
guardrail. So, we do have some coordination with utility, based on OSHA requirements. That was one of the biggest questions, was the concern that you needed to be 20 feet away from the power lines, with the crane, but because we know the voltage, after talking to CMP, it's a 10-foot setback, and they've indicated they've got some options if we have to move the line on the pole itself, but it sounds like it'll be a manageable scenario.
Any other questions? Council?
I'd make a motion to accept the bid from Harry Crooker and Sons at $278,070.10.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Thank you.
It is exciting when we actually get bids in lower than what we anticipated.
Yes, I mean, the bridge structure itself ended up being more, but the grind and overlay, the bridge itself was like 127,000, I think. I think you got the breakdowns. And the paving part of it ended up coming in, I mean, they were all over the place, if you looked at the bid tabs.
While you're there, Ryan, could you just give an overview of the rest of the road as far as the ditching and the tree cutting that's been all put out to bid?
Yeah, the tree cutting was put out to bid. We had 3 bidders, and James Carville is currently doing that work. The ditching, the operations manager got some hourly rates from a number of vendors, and that's, the lowest rate was $75 from Wendell Carr Jr. He's also happens to be the road commissioner in Bowdoin, and Bowdoin is going to be doing their end of the road as well, so that entire section of Fish Road will be completed. He's ditching the Bowdoin end, and then he's going to do the Lisbon end once the tree clearing is completed. But he'll be working with Crooker on his own to have the paving and the grinding done.
And there was one thing that was brought up earlier at a meeting, have we actually made arrangements to let the people know on that road by a letter or some form that the road would be closed or not be operable, or, I mean, have we reached out to the people on that road to
Not
let
yet.
them know?
Now that we've got a contract awarded, we can start talking schedule with Crooker, and then we'll put notification out to all the property owners on that road.
Yeah, because I don't believe there's any blasting or anything, it's basically just,
There's we didn't do any borings or anything like that, so it's hard to say, but based on what's out there now, there's not anticipated to be any.
do you feel that road will be closed for some portion of the time? I mean, you would have to be,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
All right, and that's something that we have to be
That's something we'll
coordinated.
come back to you, I guess, and give you the
Okay.
schedule once we get
Okay,
to that
good.
point.
As long as people are informed, I guess that's the biggest thing.
Yep.
Mike?
The tree cutting and the ditching bids didn't have to go through us?
It was under 10,000, and we put it out and got several different bids, some of them with 3, some 4. The tree cutting there was a few bids on that one.
We had three on the tree and 4 on the hourly rate.
I was just curious why we had these in front of us this morning.
Just in case you ask those.
Because I was asking the question why,
He was asking.
why we didn't see the bids. And it was because they came in lower than the 5,000. And I assume that the hourly bid is because they're going to be working with us. Basically, we're
Yep.
using them as renting their equipment in a sense and an operator.
Essentially, we're getting our equipment and operator. I mean, that was the same thing across the board, so.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next item?
Just want to,
Sure.
before we go,
Sure.
I'd just like us to keep in mind that I know we're always trying to save money, right? But at the same time, we do have a policy that says we like to keep business in town,
Yep.
right?
And we do look at that when the bids come in, and we send it out to all of our people in town, and some responded and some didn't. Which-
No, but I mean, just from what you gave to us, right? We had a in-town person.
Yeah.
It's a bid, it was slightly higher, but, you know, there is, I think, a 10% or so threshold
Yes, there is.
to allow us to do that, so just keeping us in tune with the fact that,
Trying to keep it local.
Absolutely. Want to keep it local.
That was my question, so how it worked out. Any other questions on that? I'm glad to see us moving forward with the project. It'll be kind of nice to see that taken care of. Next item, Dwyla?
2012-83, Mid-Maine Waste Action Corporation contract.
I got contacted by Mid-Maine Waste. We were about to enter, as you can see from the letter, our 5th year of the contract, and they came across with a offer that I think we need to seriously entertain. Currently, we're paying $81.25 per ton to dispose of our solid waste, and they're offering a 63, or for next year would be 59.88 per ton. So we are seeing a considerable savings of over $50,000 to dispose, and the contract agreement is you can do 5 years or 10 years. The interest cap is the same as they offered in their other contracts, so there's nothing different there. My recommendation would be to do a 5-year contract, and which is what you've had in the past.
Any question from council?
the 5-year contract's a different value at $63.77.
Right.
The 59 number you referenced was for a 10-year.
10-year contract, yep.
But we're actually recommending the
63.77.
which is still $20 less than what we're paying
Yeah.
now, but
Just so the public knows, we dispose of 2,728 tons a year. That's been our average, so that's, and we actually put in our budget that we were going to see a 3% increase this year, so this will be some savings
Steve,
for us.
why don't you want to go with a 10-year contract?
I hate locking into long-term agreements.
Especially if they drop that much now, 5 years now, they may have
Okay.
competition
Right,
drop
yeah,
again.
that number could go down.
Yeah.
Right, I don't think it's a good idea to lock in for 10 years. Who knows
No,
what the
I
future will
understand.
bring.
Just asking.
Who actually, that is,
So the cap is 2 to 4% over the term, the entire term.
Annual, yeah. Well,
Not annually, it can't go, the way I understand the way this is written is, it won't go up more than 2 to 4% in total over the 5 years.
that's right. Yep. That's what it says.
Well, I want to make sure the
No,
contract
actually,
Yeah.
is written that way, too. 'Cause it would be different if it was 2 to 4% a year, too.
well, it
That's
actually
kind of the way it's written on
That's
the
what it
bottom,
says.
yeah.
It says
Yeah.
it would
2 to 4
annually
per year.
adjust 2 to 4% over the next 5 years.
which means that it would be
Annually,
2
so
to
it- and that's what
4%
we-
annually.
Our current contract is the same. It's approximately, a maximum on ours is 3% that we have currently.
But I guess my point is, our current contract may be 2 to 4%, right? Annually, okay? So they're lowering the price because of the economy. Why wouldn't you lower your
Interest
cap,
cap? I can't answer that.
right?
I'm surprised.
Gone back to them and said, can they lower their cap?
I have not done that.
I mean,
I
I
can
think
certainly-
they want to have a little bit of flexibility in there because they don't know what their prices are going to be, so.
And they're basing it, and as they included in the proposal, where they get their information from, Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they've always done that, and I've had dealings with them, Mike, so
any other question from council?
it's a volatile market.
The question, is there, and I don't know that much about it, is there many vendors out there that actually offer this service? I mean, is this something that we should be bidding out to, or is this actually just, is there one player?
No, you can choose to bury it in landfills, or Casella, I think it's Casella, has different landfills, one in New Hampshire, and there's, I'm not sure if it, I think it's Casella's is up in Hamden. So you can choose that, or you can choose to burn it. MWAC burns theirs and generates electricity, and there is one down in Brunswick or Biddeford that does the same thing, and that's been in the papers lately. They're trying to relocate that out of the middle of the city. So there's competition, and that could be why they're looking at this.
Is it worthwhile for us just to have the other option so we can compare? I mean, I don't know. I
Well,
mean,
the
that's,
the difference is you're going to have to haul it. We haul our own solid waste,
Yeah.
and we're only hauling it to Auburn versus going to other places.
Transportation
A bit of
costs
free-
gonna be
Yeah.
sky
Price of
high.
diesel.
it's worth asking, that's all.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason they're
Okay.
dropping, and the reason they're dropping is because they feel that it potentially could be lost to somewhere else. You usually don't get more for less.
No, you
That's
don't.
usually a rule they learned a long time ago, so. Any other questions? So basically, they've looked at it, and they've basically said this is the most economical way of doing it, and this is actually the best deal that we could get this point
I
in time.
think so, yep.
So I would make a motion to accept the 5-year option at $63.70 a ton.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Order passed, 6-0.
And I'd ask you before you sign the agreement to try to barter with.
Barter with the cap, I will
Make
do
the
that.
cap
Absolutely.
down, if you can.
I can ask.
Never hurts to ask.
No.
Oh, it doesn't.
Next item, Twyla?
Other business, Davis Cemetery on the Littlefield Road.
Mr. Packard, who is sitting in the audience, I don't know if everybody knows Mr. Packard, I'm sure you do, came to see me last week, and he and Mr. Davis have been taking care of the Davis Cemetery, and he's asked if we would consider taking that over for them. It's just the two of them who've been maintaining it for years, and they're getting younger, so they want more time to themselves. And with that, they have an account, which we'd call, if it was ours, it'd be a perpetual care account of approximately $13,000. And it's a discussion that I told them I'd bring up to the council and we could talk about it. I included one of the state statutes. I got Roger digging for another one because I couldn't find it. What I was familiar with is that if somebody wants to abandon the cemetery, the town has an obligation to take it over if there's veterans, and there's a few veterans there, Revolutionary War veterans as well as Civil War veterans. So it's up to you what you would like to do.
I'd like to hear from council. I would probably I hate to push everything to workshops, but I'd like to know more about just our requirements and the other cemeteries in town of what potentially could be a question, or is that,
Well,
does
what
that
was
need?
and can you explain what the 13,000 you mentioned was?
The $13,000 is Mr. Packard can explain it. It's in the bank account.
Hello, Bob Packard, Littlefield Road. Jerome Davis and I have been taking care of the cemetery for decades, Jerome more than I. And we have a CD at the credit union that's $11,000 and a little over $2,000 that is in a cash reserve account. And what we've discovered is it's getting rather cost prohibitive to have it mowed. And plus, there's no other real active families in the area to look after the cemetery. So we thought it would be, informally we agree, that we thought it would be appropriate now to approach the town because there were funds that could help. And this young man, I think, was in the office and had experience as a youngster taking care of cemeteries. So we'd really appreciate very much your consideration of it. And I had volunteered that I and Jerome, and if there's other citizens of this community that want to be on an advisory group or whatever to oversee it, we'd be happy to do that. So we appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. Any other discussion as far as it's a new one to me, so I'm not that familiar in the process. I mean, does council want to entertain the idea of doing a workshop just to understand if we were to take this on, what our other obligations may be for other cemeteries in town and I think it's a real practical thing to do. It sounds like it would be a right move for the town, and it sounds there's a lot of history there. I just want to make sure that we're following the proper protocol of what we need to do.
Yeah, Roger, if we hold our meeting, it's a question I would ask, if you're going to hold a meeting on July 3rd, just before, or not, I mean, it's an option you have, you can change it. But if you do, whatever date, if you choose to leave it at July 3rd, Roger will be here because we have labor negotiation things we have to talk about, along with some other legal issues. And I've asked him to provide that document I couldn't find. Excuse me. And also, we'll be talking about some of the other workshop items, budget tonight.
Does council want to just move to discuss this in the next workshop?
I can't be there the 3rd.
Maybe the 3rd.
Well, he said next workshop.
Next
He didn't say
workshop.
we're
We'll discuss
gonna-
it, yeah.
We're gonna have a discussion at some point in time as whether we meet on the 3rd or not.
Okay, I
All
can do
right.
that.
You might not have
Okay.
enough counselors here to have a meeting.
Right.
If everybody else would like to have a workship on it, move to a workshop?
I mean, I think we can have a brief one. I think
yeah.
we just need to ask a couple of questions. And
Yep.
Like,
But I
if
think
we're
it's a,
following this.
in general, I think it's an okay thing to do.
I think so too. Just make sure we're taking care of them, but we do appreciate you coming forward because there's a lot of history there. Next item?
Upper dam on the Webster Road.
Ryan's going to address that. There's been quite a bit of information going back and forth in the town office from citizens and officials from the state and the Atlantic Salmon Foundation. So Ryan will brief you on what we know at this point.
No, don't know. During the major storm, it was a couple weeks ago now, time flies, the spillway, I think it's called the spillway. The spillway was breached, and that has since allowed is it called the spillway, Ken? Can you tell me what it's called? Stop logs. The overflow? The sort of dam? Okay. Obviously, my first call was to Ken, to ask him what to do, and he had experience with the part that fell apart was one of the last things that Miller Hydro did before we got it, and I understand it was roughly 15 years ago, thereabouts, something like that. And so the first thing we did was we opened the gates to lower the water level even more so we could get a look at the bottom of that section to figure out how we can address fixing what was there. And then along those same lines, the questions, of course, that have come up on what kind of permitting requirements are there. As council, most council members know, I believe Andy Good is here from the Atlantic Salmon Federation. They have major experience with dams. They were responsible for or worked towards the removal of the one on the Little River. So I met with him this morning to talk about what kind of options there are and what his group could do to help point us in the right direction. And engineer that works with them on a regular basis came out and offered his advice. And there's a whole host of options right now, and none of them are going to be quick. None of them are probably going to be cheap, other than to fix what's there. But based on the condition of the existing dam, rest of the dam structure, I mean, there's lots of brick portions that have just been wiped out. The concrete's in rough shape. It sounded like the possibility was to temporarily put back what was there. And again, it sounds like there may be some permitting required. At least you need to consult with DEP before we do that, and then figure out how we're going to do that. And I haven't had a chance to follow up with Ken to get some more advice from that avenue, but I don't really know what to do at this point.
You just have a problem.
Right, and
we own it, huh?
yes, thanks to Miller giving it to us, we own it. So it's now our liability, and I mean, Andy can answer some more questions if you like, but the thought is to at least, I mean, based on the feedback, it seems pretty clear that at least the vocal majority right now would like to see the water levels restored there.
That would be a good thing,
Yeah, so we need to address the temporary fix, but long-term, working with Andy's group, there's a possibility that we could apply for some grant funding to help determine a feasibility study for the long-term plan with the dam. And again, nothing's, I mean, it's inevitable that, we could fix what's there, but it's going to happen again at some point, I would imagine. Or something worse, depending on the condition of the rest of the dam, so.
Are the gates still open?
The one is, and we still haven't got the water level low enough to even look at the bottom. And that's where the DEP, from what I was given for information today, if we go to sandbag that area where it's, so then we could close the gates back off, we need to discuss that with DEP beforehand. I'm going to put Ken on the spot, but if he wants, if there are other options, I mean, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get the information so we can figure out the best course of action at this point, with the idea that we'll at least temporarily fix it.
have a dumb question.
Right in.
There was some talk a couple of weeks ago about the possibility of some FEMA monies. I know it was particular to washouts and stuff on the roads, but would that storm be considered the straw that broke the camel's back with the dam and potentially any FEMA?
That funding, there wasn't enough damage throughout the county for us to qualify. So,
If we included the dam?
Even if we
is there-
included the
dam.
price of a
Yeah.
whole new dam?
Yeah, I bet.
It was a nice try.
yeah, it was.
I mean, one of the things that, as Ryan brought up, that the dam has been in discussion for a year or so now, if not more, the idea of trying to make it a fishway through there so the fish can actually go back up through. So, I mean, this has been a discussion. So, I mean, there's a lot of avenues now, you know, whether or not, how we do it. I agree with Mike, there's a lot of concern in town that we need to repair what we got there, to try to do it the most practical way, and then we can't just sit on it, we need to do something, and then possibly plan for a long-term arrangement to improve it in some manner.
Right.
I think depending on cost,
That's a fact.
Yeah.
I think depending on cost, I think we gotta patch it so we can get the water level back up, and then work quickly through the long-term approach for it. But I don't think we can sit here, I mean, unless it's just totally cost prohibitive on the patch, which I would then think the long-term approach is gonna be really cost prohibitive unless you're getting all kinds of grant money or something, but get it patched, get it back up to level, and figure out how we go get funding and stuff like that to make a better fix for it.
I guess the council asked Steve and Ryan to actually do what they can to patch it, and then actually try to work with everybody involved to try to make a long-term plan that's going to suit everybody's needs. What that is, I don't know. But
Well, that's the intention. I mean, it's more than likely, and based on, again, my discussions this morning, that, you know, from now until full long-term decision, you're talking a year or two. So if we can put something back, I mean, we can reuse what's there, we should be able to get at least a couple of years out of it to then work through that process. But getting even the short-term portion completed is going to take us some time this summer as well. So, I mean,
Like how much time?
I can't give you an answer to that right now.
I mean, do
We're
we
still
know-
waiting on DEP to get back to us, so, I mean,
Okay, so how do we hound
We
them
chase
so
them.
we can get?
That's
An
one of
answer
the,
from
that
them.
was one of the points of meeting with Andy this morning, and Andy, if you want to pipe in anytime, please. He's pretty, he's pretty comfortable that he can help us get some callbacks faster than we would on our own, so we're working through him and his contacts to make that happen, and we'll keep you updated as.
And there's other issues up there, potentially people that were affected by this, is the main electronics whole thing going on and all that stuff, all brings different issues to it, right, as far as for the flow of the river and up and down, and
May help us get it paid for.
Well, the DEP did call, there was a message from them today, and that was from their person that's responsible for that site, so. There's so many arms of DEP, we'll get them all together. And that was the plan, that sometime in the next week or two, to get everybody from inland fisheries. Because the other issues, and the reason, one of the main reasons why Andy's here is because the Androscoggin River and the Sabatis River is a prime salmon return, or you'll have to speak.
go ahead, Andy.
if you want to
Yeah,
just give us.
I have a couple things here. Hi, I'm Andy Good with the Atlantic Salmon Federation, and we're a nonprofit group over in Brunswick, and a lot of our work is in down East Maine and up in the Penobscot watershed, but the Androscoggin is right in our backyard and goes right by our office, and so you know, we've had an interest in it and been working a little bit over in this area. And the Sabatis isn't an Atlantic salmon river, you know, and in the Androscoggin is not the highest priority in the state for Atlantic salmon restoration, but the Sabatis does have a nice run of river herring, alewives in particular, and I guess some blueback herring. And the Maine Department of Marine Resources has been stocking 6 ponds, mostly Sabatis Pond, up in the watershed. And so this past month, just in the last month, they had over 100,000 river herring come back to the Brunswick Dam, and almost all of those came out of the Sabatis. And just a couple weeks ago, before that big rain, you would have seen, we got pictures of about 10,000 river herring stacked up on Mill Street, you know, below that dam. So Our long-term goal, and it always was long-term, that hasn't changed, is to, get fish passage up through the Sabatis through a combination, and this is true wherever we work. It's, wherever, every situation is different. In some cases, it's fishways, in some cases, it's dam removal. And we probably build 2 fishways for every dam we remove, somewhere in that. But, and I know we just did a cursory look at this dam, a couple of years ago, and it seemed on that side channel, that old power canal or whatever it is there, that, maybe that would be an area for a fishway. Now we've seen that, that's what blew out, and you look over there, there's a lot of deterioration. There's a lot of structural, it's just an old dam. I mean, that's as I mentioned to somebody, on the main stem of these rivers, where these hydro dams, you don't see those blowing out because they get fixed up and they get paid a lot of attention to. But in the tributaries, and this is true all over New England, these dams are a lot of very old dams that, were built for a purpose that's long gone and now provide a different stream of benefits, but a lot of them aren't economic benefits, and so there's not a lot of money that goes into fixing these things up. And so, it's not all that uncommon, what we're seeing on the Sabatis. The Sabatis is one of the wild cards is the contaminants, and that's not an area we have a lot of expertise in. But I think I was here last fall talking about a feasibility study down at the Mill Street Dam. That has been completed. We are in the process of scheduling, that will be publicly announced, a meeting in July to discuss the results of that, and we're in the process of trying to get Miller and the agencies and the engineers and the fisheries folks together to sort of negotiate what an acceptable solution is at that Mill Street Dam. We've got some remnant contaminants there. We also have a water main that needs to be buried, which we have now final design plans for. So we've got all the cost there to figure out a solution. We just need to get all the parties together to figure that out. For this one, this dam that just, this breach, there's a temporary problem, which is certainly a problem, but, in a longer term, what we would probably recommend is a feasibility study where, the town probably puts up some money, not necessarily a lot. This is where we go after grants for feasibility studies, and it's usually a 1-to-1 cost share, and we have the ability to raise some private funds as well, with the town participating somewhat, and I don't even know what that would be, but it would be and the scope of work, you folks would be involved in determining it, but it would look at differently, what you have in most feasibility studies, doing nothing, what the implications are of that, leaving it like it is right now, building the dam back, say with a fishway, what the costs of that are, removing the dam, what that option is, and then potentially there's something in between there where, you have contaminants, so you may need a impoundment, but maybe you don't need as high as is now, and there's a way to, lower that dam, so you still have an impoundment, but you get some of the liability of that dam, lower that future liability. So it's, that would give you, I think any of these things, it's sort of a cost-benefit, comes down to a cost-benefit analysis, and the benefits aren't something I can really speak to. I mean, I think some of the, it's upstream landowners or recreational use or historic, things like that. I think the feasibility study would give you the cost information, what your different options are, and what each one would cost, and then you guys would have to determine the benefits and decide what a course of action would be. I mean, to me, a feasibility study, most of these grants, we're past the cycle now. We're in the process of doing a lot of the work, on other projects this summer. Those grants are usually in the fall or over the winter. So if you were able to get the funding and do a feasibility study that started over the winter sometime, it would probably be about this time next year that you'd have a feasibility study that would basically provide you with more information and then decide what which way the town wants to go. And then, and then you've got obviously permitting. Permitting is permitting is a real pain in the neck, in these projects. I don't care what side of the fence you're on. It's, that probably can be a third of the, engineering and permitting can be a third of the cost easy of any of these projects. I mean, some of these things, whether it's building a fishway or taking a dam out, really aren't that costly. It's all the things leading up to it that can be costly. From a temporary standpoint, as far as how, I don't know what you'd have to do there. What level of permitting you've got to decide. The agencies can decide, but I think we, with our help, we could get the different agencies out here pretty quickly to take a look at it. It's a question of whether you need some engineering design, or you could get, somebody like Shaw Brothers or one of these other, construction firms that's familiar and has done some of this type of work to, come in and just sort of fix what was there on a temporary basis. But it, will be a temporary basis, because if all you have to do is, you don't have to be an engineer to go take a look at what's over there now. And, these 50-year storms seem to be happening about every 10 years. That's the problem. And, that was a big slug of water. But, I live in Brunswick, and we had 8 inches. I remember a couple summers ago, we had 2 8-inch storms. So, I think that's the right approach, would be to continue to look at it. The other, just one wild card you have a little bit, and it doesn't seem to make sense, but it's the Sabatis is in critical habitat for Atlantic salmon, and Atlantic salmon were listed as endangered back in 2009. So you've got that level. So I think any long-term solution would need to involve a fishway of some sort, but that's I don't think that you folks were always, I think, amenable to that, and that's where something we would help participate in. But there's a lot of information gathering, I guess, that needs to take place, and the short-term stuff I'm not as familiar with. I can just help line up some of the people for Ryan to work with, but
We appreciate that.
That'd be good. Thanks.
So our short-term fix ought to be at least a 2 or 3 year short-term fix.
Right. Good.
Is there any health effects for that river being down like that?
I think those are all questions that need to be asked, so, none of that stuff that we,
Smells just like an open door.
there was a lot of water that displaced a lot of material everywhere.
A lot of dead material in the river already.
In places that didn't have rivers. I was on 125 in Durham at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was up to my waist in the middle of the road on 125. There's how much water flowing down through that brook. Next item, Twyla?
Town manager's report.
We covered that. The county dispatch, just to bring you a little bit up to date on that, Mike was in on the budget committee meeting. The county budget committee turned down, chose not to fund the county dispatch requests or county commissioners' requests for funding for equipment and for building restoration. It was in the paper, but they basically have asked them to come back with more information and a better plan. So that's on hold. We're moving forward with our dispatch and getting that ordered. We have been sitting down with Durham and Sabatis. We sat down with Durham today, and we sat down with Sabatis on Friday, and they have requested that we take on their dispatch, so we're putting together a proposal for them, and they're taking it back to their elected officials who encouraged them to come see us. So the outcome of what will happen with the county, I can't answer that, and that will be in the future. Also, as Mr. Fillmore mentioned, the library had their opening reading program today. It was pretty awesome. The main art glass studio on Main Street came in with all kinds of bugs in his glass. If anybody's ever been there, he's got some pretty exotic things, and these children were so excited to see what this was and laughing, and Diane, as usual, does a tremendous job. When I was there was the first session. They had 2 sessions. The first one had 30 kids and their parents, and the second one, I think, had about the same number. 30 more kids came down at 3 o'clock, so he did a whole afternoon with them, and he had exotic sticks crawling up his arm, and the huge millipedes and cockroaches, and these were alive. He also brought his collection of butterflies, and he was excellent. And
Sounds like you had fun.
I did. It was pretty cool. I like bugs. So they do a great job, and that program has just been successful year after year, and I commend them, as Larry had, that they just do a fabulous job, and the kids enjoy it and always remember it. So
good.
The other part is that we get talking about the workshops and the fire works ordinance. That's something that I think we've had 21 complaints in the last month up until this weekend, which we had probably more than we've had all month. and police have been pretty active. And I sent to you the action that the LCPAG committee said not to take any action. That was their recommendation, and give it till September to see what happens with the public, and we're not sure what the public will say, but we heard today what the public's been saying, and the phone's been ringing off the hook a little bit at our office and in the dispatch complaining about fireworks. So, what would you guys like to do?
I think the council can have a discussion. We actually talked today at length after, a few different phone calls and stuff of different actions we can take and where we're at. As you know, and you would, as some had seen reading through some of the minutes, I mean, we have been actively pursuing it to see what the best avenue would be. Luckily, we have a state that legalized it. If that's what you like, if you don't, well, then it wasn't a good choice by the state. But with them legalizing it, kind of puts every town into a unique circumstance of how they handle it. As a council, we actually listened to a public hearing where there was kind of mixed views, and we were looking at different avenues of how we could control it without actually being totally restrictive. We actually sent it out to the Police Advisory Committee to review it. They looked at it and actually came back, I believe what Steve was just saying, to give us some time so they can get some data to see exactly what type of complaints or concerns they have and what other municipalities are doing as far as to control it. We looked, and there's really it is really tough when you start looking at noise ordinances versus what the state gives you for guidelines for fireworks and how that all plays in. And I think it's something new for every municipality to try to figure out where those balances are, and for our police staff. And you are right, there is resources that come along with this. Unfortunately, even if we ban them, we're going to have to still have some of those resources because people are still going to be using them. So I know our police are kind of trying to work through the idea of how to properly handle this, and as a council, I guess all we can do is kind of keep moving forward and actually keep a discussion. There's no one action we can take this evening to actually do anything to change it much, and we've looked into that. And a lot of our short-term emergency type ordinance changes really, when we don't know if they legally apply. So that's one of the things that we're going to keep working on. Does council have any input that they would like to put on the discussion, though? Mike?
I mean, I guess the only thing I would suggest is, because of this upturn here recently, and I'm not exactly sure what's driving this upturn, but I kind of would suggest that the council get together with the Lisbon Policing Advisory Group and kind of have a workshop and talk through some of the recent events and everything, and what their opinions were in the past and their thoughts are, and where council might be at, and take all that information and see, does it mean we should speed it up quicker than what the community policing group said, instead of September? Should we speed it up sooner, or, I just make that as a suggestion to try and...
What we could actually do is, and I'll listen to other council members to see what they want, and have Steve put that in one of our workshops coming up shortly. And I agree, I would like to sit back and listen to what their decisions was and what they were based on. And I think we're starting to get data from everybody, because there's a lot of communities doing different, making different ordinances for different reasons, and just to make sure that we're doing the right thing.
And I would promote to the citizens to, keep pumping us with information, for or against, either way, whatever, to help give us as much information as we can that helps make a decision.
Excuse me. Is there...
I was just going to say, after receiving a phone call from one person and then some comments from a couple of other people here and there, oh, did you see the fireworks last night? Most of them aren't absolutely negative, but I'm concerned about a trend that we might not have a handle on. And I think having more input from citizens is important for us to be able to make some headway in the workshop and to know more about it. It's one thing to complain to your neighbor on the phone or in the backyard about the fireworks that somebody else put off, but it's another thing to make sure that we know about it. Not just that they were used, but how it affected people. So we just need to know that. And people are starting to talk about the negative effects that fireworks are having on their own neighborhoods and families. So I think we need to know that.
Mark?
Yeah, no, I agree with the idea that we definitely need to have a workshop and meet with them. I think we might also want to have, at some point, a public hearing for the public to come and, whether they're for or against it, and tell whatever their own experiences are, so we're not just going on, our experience in another committee, but, let the public, whoever has strong feelings either way, come in and talk to us, before we actually do something. But I think, we do need to expedite it a bit and get a little faster here. I think waiting until September could be a long summer. I live on Route 9, and it sounds like south central LA up there, so I can't imagine if you're
Mostly
living.
Roger, right?
I can't imagine if you're in the downtown, people are shooting it off right next door.
Give you just a brief moment. You had a comment that you want, just real quick, though,
Yeah,
if you
I
could.
just wanted to ask that if currently we're following the state law, all right? So enforcement of the state law is, there is a fine, a civil violation fine that goes along with those that, and I understand that most people are going to want to just give them a notice, but then, like a warning, but then, like Friday night, when the gentleman was very blatant about continuing to set them off, is the town council willing to make sure that whomever, the citations, the police department are giving those?
They, I spoke to the chief today, and they actually, it's a tough scenario for a lot of towns, municipalities, how they handle that. I know they are definitely doing everything they can. One of the things he encouraged was if there is a concern, for people actually to call and actually voice a concern, not so we call and complain about, but actually so it's logged in. So that way there, it helps if there are concerns being logged at certain residences or certain areas. That helps keep track of certain areas where there may be a concern. One of the things that we were hoping to do when we were looking at different options was the idea of the kind of that permitting process. One of the good things about it wasn't allowed for any really in-town fireworks because of the setbacks. But again, there's a lot that goes along with that, and be very almost, when you start enforcing stuff like that, it just kind of goes, there's a lot to it. I wish it was easy, but I think at this point, we're listening to everybody's concerns. We want to make sure that everybody has their opportunity to put the input. Larry, quick second.
Well, I share this lady's concern, as I think all of us do. And we have a state law in place for noise and everything, as she pointed out. Until we can get a city or town ordinance in place, why can't the police enforce the state laws? And if we want to give them a warning the first time, I'm all for that, okay? But like this lady had called the police, they talked to the individual. He said, okay, it's cool. As soon as the police left, he started again. Now that's the time for us to step in and write a citation, okay? We need to enforce something. If we have state laws, let's enforce them. Now, I don't say we're going to break bad on everybody, because they're fireworks and they're legal now, and we have a working process. But until we get one in place, give them a break the first time, but the second time around, let's enforce the state laws. Thank you.
Next item. You have more in your...
Yeah, we just need to talk about workshops, and maybe we can do that during council communications.
Yep.
We have, Roger has collected all the information we need to sit down and talk about the budget referendum question, and also another request that was made to look at having a finance committee versus an advisory board, and the functions would be more than just looking at the budget, but at functioning as an audit committee as well. And then the water and sewer, or the water department question that's been raised by Mr. Bickford, we need to have a discussion on that as well. So I know, Mike, you've mentioned that we keep some of our regular meetings either light or hold one meeting in the month be just a workshop with no business, and we can do either one. Some is usually hopefully light, but.
Is that a practicality that we can split it up and have one a business meeting and the other one a workshop meeting through the month? Is there anything written in our?
No, there's nothing that says we can't do that.
Okay.
Just have to hold 2 meetings.
I just think we have a lot to work through through the summer period. I agree. The three workshops that we talked about, the budget and the finance committee and the water department, however that would be discussed, would all be charter changes. So I think we need to actually get on those quite quickly and at least discuss them. With all three of these, I think there's a lot of discussion. I think these are going to be probably one a night, not so much multiple ones. Then when we add the fireworks in there, that's 4 workshops fairly quickly.
And we have to talk about zoning as well. We have some things that need to be addressed on that.
Right, Route 9 and the abandoned cemeteries.
So why don't we bring that out front right now? When it comes to the beginning of July, July 3rd doesn't seem to be appropriate.
I was going to, in the council of communications, I was going to recommend that we eliminate our meeting on July 3rd, just because it's that holiday week. A lot of people take vacations and stuff like that, and I think it's going to be hard for some of the councilors to maybe even give you a full regiment of council to be here. So I would say our next meeting should be regular schedule of July 17th. And
Just go with one meeting in July? Is that what your recommendation is?
He
Or
must be talking to himself because no one can hear him.
I think he's talking to the mic, but he can speak up. So is your recommendation for one meeting in July, or would that actually work?
I don't mind. You could meet, because July happens to be a 5-week month.
Correct.
Right? So you could meet on the 17th and maybe the 31st.
I would lead towards that for our workshop. Yeah.
Give the week of the 3rd off because of the holiday and people's family stuff and everything, and meet on the 17th and the 31st, and one of them could be a business meeting, and one of them could be a workshop meeting.
Could we actually set a plan that the 17th be a business meeting, and the 31st be a workshop at this point, and schedule the 2 most important ones?
And I would like to request for the workshop meetings that we have data
As much
in
material as you
advance
can get.
so that we can have a chance to study it a little bit before having to study it at the workshop.
I agree.
Roger says he's got most of that information already put together, because I've asked him to do that quite a while
And now you
ago.
just need to set the priority of which ones you want to do first.
That's a tough one, and I think Steve's going to have to look at it and see which ones are ready, yeah.
Charter amendment ones are the ones you really need to adjust first, because you got to
I
get
know we
through.
got a lot of people out there, a lot of complaints on the fireworks ordinance.
Yeah, and that as
Right, but
well.
we have
So,
That's
We
a
have the ballot
time-sensitive
that
one.
we'd have to get the stuff prepared for.
Right, the ballot, we don't have to have that done until mid-September.
right. We have to hold public hearings on it.
Right.
Did you say that Roger does have the paperwork ready for
He
the
has the
budget one?
paperwork for the referendum questions already put together, and also recommendations on different ways to look at it, so.
So why don't we do the budget and the fireworks on that 31st? Does that work? So can we do 2 of those in one night?
I don't think you can do 2.
All right,
I think the budget one's going to take a lot of time.
okay.
I think the fireworks one will take a lot of time.
I'm a little concerned about the timeliness of the fireworks one because it's summertime and it's conducive to a lot of fireworks being set off. And I'm the first one to enjoy a good fireworks display. But I'm concerned about the folks who are taking the brunt of it. And I'm just concerned about timeliness. I don't know what we can do to
Well, does
take care of that.
Does council want to make that on the 31st of the fireworks and actually have the advisory group come in for that night and have a discussion?
That would be good to me.
Depending upon the schedule, we might be able to squeeze some time in on the 17th if we have a light agenda. I could try and do that and see what it is. I mean, usually this time of year is a little bit lighter than
The alternative is we'd always just have a workshop on one of the other Tuesday nights there that we wouldn't have a regular meeting. None of us like to come in for extra nights, but
let me
I
check
think
with
the
the
citizens
agenda
would
on the
appreciate it.
17th.
At this point, why don't we plan on the 17th and 31st, and we'll see how we can arrange that to be most productive? All right.
Right.
Anything else on that?
Nope, that's it for me.
That is for you? Moving forward.
Counselor Communications.
I'm good now.
You all good? That was your, Roger?
Well, on a fireworks display, ordinance, worst comes to worst, we can always put it up and vote in November. Let the people decide.
I was just concerned about covering the information about the fireworks ordinance, and I think we covered everything, and the only thing I'd like to reiterate that Ms. Shimko brought up was that it actually does cost the town money every time a police officer has to get called, but it's important that we do it now so that we can keep track of what those calls are and who they're affecting and what neighborhoods and to what extent. So, I mean, that needs to be part of our, our background information. So it's important that it will save us money down the line. So, but that's it.
Okay, I would like to also remind anyone out there watching that according to the state law, 10 p.m. is the cutoff time for the fireworks. So if you're going to shoot off your fireworks, get them done by 10 and then be done with it. Don't shoot them off at midnight. Thank you.
Is there any regulation on the days that they can be set off?
I don't think so.
Oh, I hear it. I can hear it myself, Todd, and I don't believe there is any.
No, there's not.
There is not anything in the state law now.
I just want I just would like to have the numbers of calls that have come in. I think it's probably pretty widespread across the community. I just was reiterating the same thing that others have asked for, that at the next meeting, we have the numbers of concern or complaint calls that have come in, because I would agree with a lot of the things that have said tonight. It's not just, people that have some PTSD, mental illness, other diagnoses are involved. And I can tell you in my community, in my neighborhood, it's been happening almost every night. And not only is it the loudness of that going off, some of them sound like gunshots, but it gets all the dogs in the neighborhood barking. And, people walk by yelling, "Shut up" at your house. And, it's really unsettling. So I think that we do need to do something about it. I just don't know.
What is the question, right? Anything else from council? Actually, I'm all set, so, next item, Twyla.
There is no executive session to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Order passed.
We have 2 papers to sign, so hang tight.